Hey everyone. I've had enough of you reach out to me in the past few months about depression, so I figured I'd finally make a video sharing some tips for dealing with it. But I do want to make a quick caveat here, which is that if your depression is crippling or to the point where you're considering suicide, please reach out to a professional. Do not look for videos online or articles or other things like that to help you. Reach out to an actual professional because that's serious and you don't want to mess around if you're in that situation. But that being said, let me share with you some of the tips that I believe will help if you have a more mild form of depression that isn't crippling. So the first thing I have for you here is that quite often we'll think that depression is more mental based. We'll think that we need to change our mindset, the way we think, and train ourselves to be more positive. But I believe depression has quite a lot more to do with physicality, with overall health. And with that, the first piece of advice I have for you is make sure you eat well, make sure you exercise, make sure you get your nutrients, and make sure you get enough sleep. These are very important things because if you neglect those things, if you don't take good care of yourself, it will make your depression worse. And I've read that even not taking care of those things on their own can make you fall into depression. You know how people say depression is a chemical imbalance in the brain? Well, the only way you're going to get a chemical imbalance like that, well, I can't say the only way, I'm sure sometimes it can be genetic, but a huge factor in that is if you're not getting enough nutrients and vitamins that you need every single day. Our body needs specific things and it needs them on a daily basis. And if you neglect that and you only eat for pleasure and you don't eat for sustenance, you could very well end up with those imbalances and end up becoming depressed. So make sure you do research on that. I'm not going to go into all that here because it would take way too long and I'm not a diet expert even though I've researched the crap out of it. So do your own research. The one thing I can say is make sure you're taking vitamin D3 supplements because that's pretty much the most important part when it comes to avoiding depression due to imbalances. Vitamin D3 is integral to controlling our moods, and if you don't get the proper amount of that on a daily basis, it can easily affect your mood and make you feel more depressed. There's a reason why, people often say that in the winter people tend to feel a bit more sad or they feel a bit of melancholy. It's because they're not able to get outside to get sunlight from the sun. It's too cold, so people stay indoors, and that means they're not getting vitamin D3, which they need. So there you go. Make sure you take vitamin D3, and just a little note in here, try to take it with vitamin K2 as well. Those two things combined will just help your body out big time. But anyway, physicality aside, the next thing I have for you is just get into the habit of doing things that you enjoy more often, even if you're alone when doing them. You see, when people are depressed, they tend to kind of close off from the world, and that means even no longer doing things that they enjoy. So try not to fall into that bad habit. Instead, do the things that you love. Do more of what you enjoy doing, those things that make you feel alive and make you feel happy to be here on this planet as a human being. Do more of those things. Even if you don't have other people to do them with, do them by yourself. At least that way you're still going to get joy out of them and you're not going to limit your happiness to the moments where you have other people around you. You'll be able to be happy even in your own company, which is incredibly beneficial for just getting through life in general because the vast majority of the time we are not going to have other people with us. So it's helpful to be able to enjoy your own company. The next thing I have here is don't identify with your emotions. So what I mean by this one is try not to label yourself in unhelpful ways. I understand that depression is what's the proper term? I guess like a psychological term or a medical term. Basically, you can be diagnosed with it. I understand that, but it may not be very helpful to label yourself as depressed because then you're giving it all this power and control over you. You basically allow it to master you in that moment. So instead, you could say, I feel depressed, I feel sad, I feel down, but try not to give it that label of I am depressed because then you're basically acknowledging it's this huge aspect of you and you have no control in the situation and it's difficult to deal with. So that's just a a simple mindset reframe that you may find helpful because it just gives you more control over the situation. I know this sounds kind of like woo-woo, but seriously, our mindsets are incredibly powerful, and the way that we think can really impact us. So I've just found this is helpful for all emotions in general, and depression especially, because the more you identify with it, the more you just allow it to take over your life, and you don't want to let that happen. So don't identify with your emotions, and also don't judge them, and don't judge yourself as being a depressed person, or don't judge yourself as being bad or feel guilty for your emotions. Just understand they're very normal things. You can't stop them from arising within you, right? So they're normal. Just accept them as being a part of life. And sometimes we're going to feel bad. I mean, we know that. We're not always going to feel good. And if we did always feel good, then that would reduce the meaning of feeling good, because it would just be what we're used to, right? So the bad moments make us appreciate the good moments even more. So knowing that, realize that the bad emotions that you feel are just normal. They're a part of life. Accept them and just try to sit in them and try not to judge them, and definitely don't act on them, and don't feel bad for feeling bad, if that makes sense. Anyway, on to the next thing. Remind yourself that what you're going through is temporary. Remind yourself that the pain is temporary. This is incredibly helpful because at times it can feel like it's permanent. It can feel like it's a part of life that we'll never get through. But that's just not true. You will eventually be able to get through it and come out better for it on the other side. And even if that requires going to professional, you know at some point, if you do the right things, if you take the proper steps to help yourself, you will get better. Depression is not permanent. It's not going to stick with you your entire life. There are ways to mitigate it. There are ways to work around it. And there are ways to even hopefully cure it with drugs and other things out there. Although I don't know if that's the best route, because with drugs there are always side effects, but I mean, it's an option that people have. So there are ways to tackle it, and it's temporary. It's not going to stick with you forever. And even when you are depressed, you can still have moments where you feel more positive emotions, where you feel happy for a temporary amount of time, or where you just feel anything but that depression. So knowing that, just remind yourself that it's not going to stick with you forever, and you will eventually get through it. And the next thing, this is another important one. Remind yourself that you matter and your life has meaning. Because when you're depressed, it's going to feel like those things aren't true. You're going to think, what is the point of my life, especially if I feel this way? But that's unhelpful, because remember how I said those emotions are temporary, that depression itself is temporary? If you make a hasty, permanent decision off of temporary emotions, you could very much end up regretting that. And if you, God forbid, decide to go the route of permanently cutting off your opportunity to experience this existence, that's just, you see, we often take for granted the fact that we exist. Because when you truly think about it, it is insane that we're all here. Like seriously, there could have been literally nothing in existence in the entire universe. Nothing at all. And we would have no idea that that would have been the case, because none of us would have ever existed. There just would have been nothingness. And yet, that's not the case. You exist, I exist, everything around us exists, and it's insane. So knowing that, why would you want to rob yourself of experiencing what other beautiful things are out there? Or just impacting other people's lives, or being impacted by other people? You matter. If you shorten your experience, if you shorten your life, there could be thousands of people that won't be helped because you will no longer be there to help them in the future. So the more that you choose to stay strong and power through this and work on getting through it, the more people you can help in the future. And you could even create something as beautiful as your own family, where you raise children that you get to impact the hell out of, because that's literally where you're able to, that's the most impact you can have on someone, your own children, because you brought them into the world. But even if you choose not to have children, there are so many people out there you can help. Your friends, your family, strangers, people you've never even met yet but will in the future. You just never know. So remind yourself that you matter, and that this opportunity should not be wasted over temporary emotions because it's way too freaking precious. And we have no idea what came before we existed as humans, so we don't know if there's like some long ass backlog to become a human being, or we don't know what the hell is after this. We have no idea. So basically, make the most of this opportunity. Don't make hasty permanent decisions off of temporary emotions. And the last thing I have for you is just work towards the life you desire in small steps. When you're depressed, it can be hard to motivate yourself. So don't try to accomplish big things in small periods of time. Break them down into smaller tasks and then try to complete a small task as often as possible. That way you'll be able to build momentum towards your long-term goals. But if you just view your long-term goal as just going from point A to point B, where point B is accomplishing it and point A is beginning, that's way too daunting. Like, you're not going to be able to develop the motivation to go after it, especially if you're feeling depressed. So don't do that. Break it up into small steps, and that way every time you complete one of the steps, you'll be able to build that internal motivation to keep going. And it's also helpful to reward yourself each step along the way. One thing that I like to do personally myself is I'll buy myself ice cream or like a new video game to reward myself every time I take a step towards a long-term goal. So do the same thing. Reward yourself each step along the way. That way it makes it easier and easier to build that motivation to keep going. But the reason I bring this up is because the more that you take small steps towards creating the life that you desire while you're depressed, it'll help you work your way out of depression over time, because you'll be able to basically, if you feel like you're in a hole right now, it'll make it so that you start building a ladder piece by piece to climb your way out of that hole. But if you do nothing, if you just sit around and allow the depression to control you, you're not going to develop that momentum to make your life better and to eventually pull yourself out of that situation. So it's helpful to still be pursuing the life that you desire, even when you're not quite fully feeling it. At least it'll help you get out of there. Just like going to the gym helps so many people after divorce, because it just gives them something to do, and it allows them to create these benchmark goals of lifting more weight or getting into better shape. So over time, they're able to feel a lot better than they felt after their divorce, because now they've improved themselves. It's the same concept here. So just work on improving yourself in your life situation slowly over time, and eventually you'll look back and you may realize you aren't depressed anymore. You worked through it. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. I truly hope these tips have helped you, because there's a reason I didn't make this video, even though I've had people ask me to do this for a few months, is because I really wanted to make sure I was giving helpful tips. And at the end of the day, I'll always say, if these tips aren't all that helpful to you, or if you, say, further down the road are still feeling really bad, please reach out to a professional. It's important, okay? Your life is too precious to let something like this go unchecked. So if nothing is helping you, then seek professional help. They're literally trained to help you through this kind of thing. So that's an important tool, and never neglect it. Never act like it's beneath you, or never feel guilty for going that route, because it's incredibly useful and it can be something that keeps you here. So utilize it if you need it. But anyway, that's all I have for you in this video. I truly hope that it was helpful. And if so, the easiest way you can help me out is just to like, comment, and share, engage with that algorithm. And I will see you guys in future videos. Arrivederci!